Good evening. We'll start off with some background information on Lake Minatare. Lake Minatare was a Class 1 school until 2006. In 2006, Nebraska passed LB 126 to dissolve many Class 1 schools. Despite partial repeal by Measure 422, no Class 1 school districts remained by 2007. On June 15, 2006, Scottsville Public Schools absorbed Lake Minatare. The 2007 school year marked the last year that Lake Minatare was a K-8 school. In 2009, Lake Alice consolidated with Lake Minatare. And in the 2012-2013 school year, that was the final school year that 6th grade was part of the school. They went to K-5. Other Class 1 schools in the Scottsbluff and Gary area included Highland, which closed in 2006, Hague, which closed in 2007, Lake Alice, which closed in 2009, and Cedar Canyon, which closed in 2017. Highland and Lake Alice were SBPS schools, and Hague and Cedar Canyon were party-carrying schools. This slide provides some current information on Lake Minatare. Currently, Lake Minatare Elementary has 65 students. Of those 65 students, 10 are option students, and 18 are in-district transfers. The average enrollment for Lake Minatare since it became a K-5 grade school in 2014 has been around 70 students. In November, the 2024-25 Nebraska Education Profile data was released. According to the NEP, Lake Minatare was the lowest percentage had the lowest percentage of free and reduced lunch students of all schools in the district at 42%, which is below the district average of 66%. Lake Minatare received an excellent rating based on NSCAS assessments. In spring 2025, 67% of Lake Minatare 3rd through 5th grade students were proficient on NSCAS ELA, 90% of grade 3 through 5 students were proficient on math, and 80% of Lake Minatare's 5th graders were proficient on NSCAS science. This table provides information about student counts, teacher numbers, and student-to-teacher ratios at the 5 elementary schools in the district as of October 1. This count includes classroom teachers, counselors, and specialists such as music, physical education, library, media, and reading intervention, but does not include special education or English language instructors. The student-to-teacher ratio increases progressively from Lake Minatare to Roosevelt, with Lake Minatare having the lowest ratio and Roosevelt having the highest. Lake Minatare currently has 65 students, 5.2 teachers, with a student-to-teacher ratio of 12.5 students to 1 staff teacher.
Next, we will transition to the birth rates in the state of Nebraska, as these trends closely correlate with the enrollment patterns we are seeing, not only in our district but across the state. According to the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, a number of births in Nebraska has decreased by approximately 1,900 births over the past 10 years. While there's a slight increase in 2021 and a modest increase in 2024, these are short-term changes did not offset the broader trend. Overall, the long-term trajectory reflects a significant decline in the birth rate statewide. From the statewide perspective, we then took a closer look at the birth rates within Scottsbluff County. Data obtained from the Panhandle Public Health District show a pattern that closely mirrors a statewide trend. Beginning in 2016, birth rates in the Panhandle began to decline. While there was a slight increase in 2021 and again in 2024, these increases are modest and do not offset the overall downward trend observed over the previous years. Next, we examined how declining birth rates are impacting public school enrollment across the Nebraska Panhandle. The following data were obtained from ESU 13 and reflect kindergarten through 12th grade enrollment only. Preschool enrollment was excluded, as those counts may include 3, 4, and 5-year-olds and do not provide a consistent or accurate comparison of overall enrollment trends. Over the past 10 years, Panhandle Public Schools has experienced an overall enrollment decline of approximately 10%. While examining enrollment from the pre-pandemic baseline of the 1920 school year, our district reflects a 4% decline. More recently, over the past 3 years, the enrollment has declined by 3%. Across the Panhandle, only one district, which is Mitchell Public Schools, has shown an increase in enrollment over the past 6 years. However, even Mitchell's enrollment remains lower than it was 10 years ago, and its recent increase is driven primarily by the enrollment shifts from another regional school district. Minatare Public Schools also experienced a slight increase, though due to its small overall enrollment, relatively few students can create a larger percentage change. Overall, the data reflect a consistent regional decline in enrollment that aligns closely with the long-term decline in both the birth rates across the Panhandle.
So back on June 7th of 2023, the School District Property Tax Limitation Act went into effect. We are now on our 3rd year of having a budget impacted by this change. This law created a ceiling where the revenues between the general and building funds could not exceed 3% growth. However, that was a soft cap, and if we had any growth in our limited English proficiency, our poverty, or our enrollment, we were allowed to go slightly above the 3%. We are allowed to go up an additional 5%, however, that does require a supermajority vote by the board. However, at this time, the supermajority vote has not occurred. We have stayed within the soft cap of 3%. Now, while our valuation increased in 25-26 by 9.49%, this act limited what we could actually access of that valuation. In order to determine what a district is allowed to ask for in property taxes, the formula takes the prior year amount calculated, which does look at multiple years, multiplies it by your allowed growth. You then take the amounts you received in the 3 other categories, which are the non-property tax revenue, state aid, special education reimbursement, in order to determine that year's local property tax scheme. School districts are now limited to the 3% and are experiencing increases in expenses that we are not able to control, which in some years exceed our allowed growth. So as previously mentioned, we are now in our 3rd year of the soft cap of 3%. And as a reminder, this cap can be exceeded if we have any growth in membership, LEP, or poverty. For 25-26, we were allowed a growth of 3.093%. Our 25-26 revenue cap was $43,736,192. Now, when they are calculating the amount you are allowed to ask for in the local property tax asking, they are looking at multiple years. They are looking at, for this current year, what they looked at was the 23-24 other non-property tax revenue, which amounted to $4.43 million. Our 24-25 SPED reimbursement, which was $6.44 million. Our 25-26 TIOSA, which is $18.43 million. Now, when you look at those factors, what was remaining was our allowed tax asking between the general and the building fund, which was $14.44 million. Based on the 25-26 revenue cap, if we are set at the soft cap of 3%, if we do not have any growth in the enrollment, LEP, or poverty, we anticipate our cap will be $45 million between those 2 funds. Now, as the district is looking at recommendations for additions or reductions, we continue to look towards our strategic priority in our plan. Strategic priority 3.4.B states that we will continue to make fiscally sound decisions to ensure the district's strong financial position while supporting our maintenance and our expansion. Since the implementation of the School Property Tax Limitation Act in 2023, SBPS has taken a fiscally conservative approach to keep property taxes as low as possible. Again, we have not approved the 5% that we were allowed to go above and beyond. In the past 2 years, we've had annual budget reductions of $1.8 million in 24-25 and $1.3 million for 25-26. At this time, based on the information available we have for the 26-27 school year, we are projecting that we need to reduce our general fund expenditures by approximately $950,000. Now, as a reminder, part of the reason why we are making a projection of $950,000 is within the calculation of how much we are allowed to ask for and past asking, it is looking at multiple years. When we look at our non-property tax revenue, we have state apportionment included in that dollar amount. Last year for state apportionment, we had received $1.1 million. This was a little over double what we had received the year before. We had reached out to NDE to inquire and see what occurred. Why was it double what we had received the prior year? There was some interest that was not paid for several years, and so the interest was reported, and then the state had to distribute it out. The state has told us not to expect $1.1 million again this year. We're told to expect somewhere in between the $550,000 that we had 2 years ago and the $1.1 million we had this past year. However, since we have that $1.1 million, it is going against that calculation, and we are not expecting that money for 26-27. When determining what the reduction in expenditures would be in the event of Lake Minatare closing, we have to make some assumptions in order to conservatively estimate what the reduction would be in expenditures on an annual basis. First, although it is unknown exactly how many students may leave the district if Lake Minatare closes, for the purposes of financial forecasting, we assumed all students would remain attending Scottsville Public Schools. Second, we assumed that Lake Minatare boundaries would be absorbed into the Longfellow boundaries, which would be contingent upon the board approval at a later meeting. Third, we assumed we would be able to reduce our overall FTE by 9 positions. This is comprised of 4 certified and 5 classified staff. All 9 of these positions would be absorbed through attrition, which would be done through the routine retirements and resignations that we have every year throughout the district. And fourth, based on absorbing the Lake Minatare boundaries into Longfellow and the enrollment projections, we would need to add 1 certified position to Longfellow to maintain the district's standards for class sizes. Based on current enrollment at both Lake Minatare and Longfellow, we anticipate this position would be needed for 2 years. At the conclusion of the 2 years, as long as there has been no change in the enrollment trend we have been seeing, we would be able to reduce that position in 2 years' time. And finally, the assumptions that you will see here in a moment assume that the building will be sold in order to save on insurance, utility, repairs, and maintenance costs. Here you will see the projected financial information for what Lake Minatare is for school staying open and school staying closed. Now with these figures, some of these figures are averages across the district. For the teachers, the average cost for a teacher in the 25-26 school year is $95,000. At Lake Minatare, we do currently have 5.9 FTE. The 0.9 is made up of specialists that also serve other buildings. In the event that Lake Minatare will close, we are projecting that we would need to maintain 1.9 FTE within our budget. Paras. Again, this is the average cost of paras for the district in the 25-26 school year. Each para is roughly $25,000 to the district. We do not project that we would need to keep any of those FTEs, and they would all, again, be absorbed through attrition. Next, for the custodian and secretary, we took a look at the average cost for our elementary head custodian and our elementary head secretary in order to determine what the average cost is for those positions. At this time, we are projecting that we would maintain the custodian position within the district, and the secretary position would be reduced. And finally, for the administrator position, we currently have a part-time administrator out at Lake Minatare. Previously, there was a full-time administrator. However, due to a few changes a couple years ago, we did go to a model where the administrator is split between Lake Minatare, Longfellow Assistant Principal, and the after-school program. We have continued to maintain the Longfellow Assistant Principal position within our budget. And that is why you see up there the $59,000 that we would no longer have since we would remove that budget, or excuse me, position from our budget. Now moving down to the other costs. Student transportation. When we presented this information last year, we had assumed that we would need to maintain all of the routes within the district in order to help transport the students into town. Upon conversations with First Student, we have been informed that we would be able to reduce 2 routes from the district's plan with First Student, sorry. How we are able to do that is due to First Student being more efficient with being able to stop at having only 1 bus stop at a house, picking up all the children at that location, and then bringing all those students into town. Now, even if we reduce 2 routes, why you still see a $20,708 figure there, is that due to our contract with First Student, in the event we reduce our routes more than 5%, they are able to recalculate the cost because they do have fixed costs associated that is built into the route rates. We still anticipate that based off of the remaining routes we would have, that we would increase our cost for the remaining routes by about $21,000. The figure you are seeing up there this evening does not include any savings in regards to mileage, because we do pay for the mileage or the fuel cost for those buses. Next is insurance. The amount that you see there, the $3,277, is a figure that we had received from LACAP last year. The amount that we paid towards insurance that is attributed to that building. Our supplies, field trips, etc. Every year we give each building principal a budget that they are allowed to manage. It is based off of a few factors. It is based off of the student enrollment in the prior year, the number of certified staff, in order to determine what their budget would be for that following year. Again, with the assumption that all students would remain within Scottsville Public Schools, we would maintain that cost and it would be given to the buildings that those students would now be going to. The repairs and purchase services and the utilities are based off of the 24-25 data. And again, with the assumption that we would close the building and it would be sold, we would no longer have those costs. Now, when we look between school open of 1.02 million, and if the school closed and still having expenditures of 264,000, we are showing that we would have a savings of $757,000. So in alignment with our strategic plan, over the course of the past 14 months, we have thoroughly reviewed options for maintaining a balanced budget. To ensure the district is able to maintain cash reserves, we are recommending the closure of Lake Minatare at the conclusion of the 25-26 school year. In addition, should Lake Minatare be closed, we recommend that the building be listed for sale upon completion of the 25-26 school year, and that at the January 12th meeting, a recommendation for boundary changes is considered by the Board of Education. That is our presentation for this evening. What questions can I or the other presenters help answer?
Mary Ann, there's been quite a bit of talk about the cash you have available now, the funding you have available now. Do you have in front of you that information?
I can get in front of me the I'll get there, Paul. Go ahead and ask your